Welcome, everyone, to the Deep Dive, the podcast that skips small talk and goes straight for the concepts that shape our thinking and behavior. In this podcast, cold expertise is defenestrated as warm philosophy is enthroned in an attempt to explore the field in which we're all scientists looking for answers, living well. Hello, world, and welcome to an episode of the Deep Dive podcast. Today I'm joined by Tanya Raj. Hi, Tanya.
Hi, Al. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you very much. And as in the beginning of every episode, we'd like to know what you're going to talk with me about.
Sure. So, when you had first reached out to me, I know I had different thoughts, but I think something that resonates very deeply with me is a topic about aloneness, loneliness, and silence. So, maybe we can get started there.
Sure. So, in terms of just exposing us as to start a discussion, how are you thinking about it today?
All of these three terms in my head, they are separate yet interconnected. And I think I found this interconnection a couple of years back, and this was in the high Himalayas, and there's this alpine lake. And early in the morning, we were there, and I happened to find some time to myself where I was just sitting on the rock and just gazing out at the lake and the surroundings. And the only thought that was occurring to me is like these things or these mountains, these waters, they've been here for millennia. People like me, millions of people like me would have come and gone. But they stand here true to testimony to everything that has happened on this earth. And do they feel alone? Or do they feel lonely? Or is it the silence that it exudes? Do they embody that? And that thought kind of started having that interconnections for me.
Interesting. And is that something that you at all, a concept that you were aware of like earlier in your life? Does it connect to you on a personal level to something you went through earlier, or was it just a sort of epiphany when you were watching these lakes?
No, definitely. I think all of these concepts have had some connection to me in my earlier years. So I think the very first concept among these three that I learned about was aloneness. Even before I learned what is loneliness, I learned how to be alone. So, and that is because during my growing up years, it was literally a fight for survival. So there was no room to feel lonely per se. And if I have to just give you a little bit of a backstory around it, it is when I was 5 years old, I was sent away from my family. And since then, I've never been with a family. I don't have a concept of family life per se. I mean, obviously, I have a family, but what are familial bonds, or what is the care that goes around in families? I have never experienced that. And so, because I was sent away and I was all on my own, it was definitely, I think, a phase of aloneness, of learning to live by myself without any emotional support, without, as a child, if I'm 5 years old, without any physical hugs to care for me or ensure that I'm feeling mentally okay. It was it, but at the same time, I think I feel really grateful for that, because that prepared me for life very, very well. And even today, like, as soon as there's a crisis situation, all these tabs in my head start operating as with a backup plan A, plan B, plan C. So it is never something that takes me by surprise. It's more like, okay, we have a problem. Now, what do we do about it? So that was my first brush with this particular concept.
That's very interesting, and it sounds like you faced some challenges, and you definitely made lemonade from the lemons life gave you.
I took
And
the lemon and winged it right back.
exactly, and I'm very happy to hear that. So you're saying it sounds like something stuck with you, like some sort of understanding of how to operate under circumstances which are unstable or unknown. And is this aloneness then connected to like trusting yourself, that you learned how to trust yourself? And do you feel then that you are more unfazed by uncertainty and challenges?
I wouldn't say completely yes to that. So again, during the growing up years, obviously you're learning through these things, and even some of the challenges that I have faced in my adolescent years, they have taken me by surprise. They have broken me down. But I think right now, as I look back and I'm starting to imbibe the lessons of all of those years, things are starting to feel much more easier. The same kind of I would say challenges, if they come up today, I'm much more able to kind of walk through them. Also, I think there is a certain understanding that has come about that we any which ways come all alone in this world, and when we die, we will go alone. So aloneness is something that is a constant. That's that.
So you feel you have maybe you're even enjoying an advantage, like knowing what it's like and not needing the constant. You know that you don't need many others to support you. Like you're able to do things by yourself. And I'm trying to get at the notion that you said you wouldn't go back and change these things. So can you explain a little bit what edge you think you have there with these experiences that are definitely tough at first, but you say you've been forged by them. So what is it that you gained? Like, how would you explain that?
Yeah, I would absolutely not change anything. I mean, had you asked me this question maybe 10 years back, I would have said yes, I would want to change my life. I would not want to have been born. But today, I do not think of it that way. Yes, to a certain point, I've become very comfortable in being alone, living alone. And I think that was one of the greatest things that helped me during this pandemic when I was isolated. Most of the world was isolated, not just me. But having been in lockdowns and in isolation all alone wasn't difficult for me. In fact, I enjoyed that phase of my life so much, and I have accomplished so much more things that I have been procrastinating for years. I have been able to accomplish during these two pandemic years. So I think I have come to a stage where I've started enjoying my own company. Yes, obviously, if I have friends around, that's amazing. But I don't think that I hate being alone. In fact, I love being alone, and because I have so many other things that I can do when I'm alone.
That's amazing. That's great. So what we learned so far is that it's great to know how to be alone in case of a pandemic, which is a one in
No,
100 years
you
event.
don't have to go through childhood trauma to go through a pandemic situation.
That's right. No, that's great, and I love it. Are there any other places where you feel that this concept, either aloneness or loneliness, were coming more often to your mind, that you had to meditate on them specifically, or silence, which you're going to introduce later? Have there been lessons that you feel kind of contributed to how you view these concepts today?
Yeah, first of all, I do feel that there's a very, very big distinction between aloneness and loneliness. Aloneness is when you're okay with being alone, right? You're comfortable in your skin. You don't really bother if there's somebody with you or not. But loneliness, on the other hand, has an emotional angle to it, where there is a yearning, there's a longing for something which you don't really get. And most of the times that stems from intimacy or companionship or closeness to others. So loneliness definitely takes a different tinge, and I wouldn't say that I haven't felt lonely. I'm human and I feel lonely also at times. But yes, there have been very specific moments in my life where loneliness was highlighted and it came up to a surface to such an extent where I couldn't breathe. I was actually finding myself having difficulty to breathe. And that is when I realized, okay, this is the difference between loneliness and aloneness.
Yeah, it definitely takes me back to the years, of just battling depression and feeling that it doesn't matter if there are a ton of people around me. I'm lonely, and it's the cliche is that you can be very much alone even though there are dozens of people around you, right?
Absolutely. And I think those are the specific moments where loneliness has crept up. Even though, and these are during pre-pandemic years when obviously there were people around me, I could go out freely and meet everybody. Those are the times I've felt lonely, and very interestingly, during the pandemic, I haven't. So that says something.
That's interesting. And now you mentioned to me in conversation we had before, meditation. Is that something that is can be connected with those terms, and also to silence maybe?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, see, meditation again. There are different ways to approach meditation. What kind of a meditation you are doing? Is it a guided imagery, or is it a vipassana, which is silent meditation, or is it just concentrating on your breathing? Right. So whatever works for whoever, whichever individual. But meditation does. I have felt it does play a big role in grounding you to a certain extent where you learn to accept things the way they are, rather than rejecting them, that it should not be this way, or this is not what I wanted, or this is what I wanted and I'm not getting. That is what I think develops into anxiety. And meditation does help reduce that anxiety a lot. But I think the biggest form of meditation that I have found is writing. So on a daily basis, I journal. And because it is my journal and it is personal and nobody has a look at it, I can write anything in that, be it the crassest of things. If I want to curse somebody, if I have been wanting to express something to somebody, but obviously maybe due to the circumstances I can't, journaling has just been a very, very great meditation tool for me. So that has also connected all of this together. Yes.
That's interesting. Is that an approach that's commonplace to call meditation that, or is it usually the practice that's?
Um, No, I don't think so, because I also know people who swear by meditations and they can get a little fanatic about it. But I believe that if meditation is being used as a path to find God or whoever that you believe in, or you're trying to figure out your own inner self, there needs to be a little bit of a flexibility, because we're not machines. We cannot operate on the same level every single day. So if today you feel like just sitting in silence, well and good. Tomorrow, if you feel like you want to dance, do that. So meditation should be as flexible as breathing.
So silence in terms of meditation is something that you dabbled in, and you don't see it as completely necessary to be meditating in a formal way, but journaling is comparable to that in your mind. And is it a coincidence that it's something that's done silently, or is it not done silently in your case? Like, do you have something in the background or any different way?
Apart from the barking dogs, it's mostly silence. So yeah, I think you're right. It has an element of silence to it, and I know we were coming towards that. So again, silence is a very interesting concept that I have learned off late, and or rather, I'm trying to learn or imbibe. Silence can be viewed in two ways, right? So one is a silence that people think about when you say the term silence. It's like, oh, it's peace and calm, and everything is rosy, and we are in the Garden of Eden. Yes, that is the kind of silence I have experienced, where it can become so still that you can hear the soul of the universe or your own heartbeat or God's breath, whatever you want to call it, right? And that puts you in a very transcendental rhythm with things around you. But silence can also be discomforting. One, if you are a person who's not very comfortable being with your own thoughts, silence can feel like torture because then you're able to hear everything that's going on inside your head. But silence can also be toxic. I know that kind of toxic silence has been inflicted upon me. I have inflicted it upon others as well. And this is where, silence from others, where it can become unconcerting or has a facet of rejection to it, right? I mean, it is very easy to assume someone else's silence and you internalize it, thinking that, oh, I must have done something wrong, or this person is not talking to me because of this. And it's very easy to come up with those assumptions. But the truth is, it is never about you, neither is it about the other person. Every single person on this earth has their own anxieties and struggles, and they are just caught up in it. They are not necessarily uncaring or unfeeling, they are just self absorbed, or rather, I would say self focused. And that is okay. But when we start internalizing it, that is when silence can become toxic.
Yeah, that's fascinating to explore the dark sides of silence. Like, I remember a conversation I had with someone close to me at some point, who said they just wanted silence. It's interesting what you say about how people sometimes really despise being in silence because that's when all their thoughts are coming flooding in. And on the other hand, it's I get them to they're asking for silence, but they don't like the silence, which means to me they're not really talking about silence as like air carrying sound waves, right? That's not what they mean. Silence has a more abstract quality of just not being a distraction or not being something that sends ripples and distortions through your soul, right? This
Yeah.
is the more abstract silence that I think we're talking about. And I was pointing to her when we were talking that also silence is like, to me, there's this image of, the heartbeat on the monitor. And over there, you definitely want to see those spikes going up and down and keeping going and not total silence. So it's very interesting to look around this concept and really understand what we mean by silence, and see what are the positive aspects of it and what the negatives are, and really check to see if we're talking about sound waves or about something else that's more metaphorical and goes on in our soul. To you, is it something that you encountered like from the physical world, the type of silence that are sound waves that you could then later kind of carry the metaphor into your psyche, do you think?
Yeah, to a certain extent. Yes, because at the end of the day, we as humans, we are social creatures, right? And we are hardwired to interact, to communicate. But earlier this morning, I was talking to a friend, and we were talking about the same subject of silence. I don't know how that came about, and she mentioned a very interesting thing. She said, for some people, their baseline is conversation, and they like to go into silence. But for some people, the baseline is silence and they like to go into conversations. So it's important to realize, and that made me think that it's important to realize what is your baseline. It could be somewhere in between, but if it is one of the other extremes, then learn to become comfortable to operate in that, right? So, say if I have to say, I think my baseline is somewhere in between. I love conversations, but I can't just talk to anybody. Or I can talk to anybody and everybody, and I've been told about that. So I have the lack of wandering around and talking to random strangers on the streets. But they're not deep conversations. When it's deep conversations, it's with people I feel comfortable with or I know. But I like to come back to the silence of my space. And when I'm doing some deep thinking or writing, I need absolute quiet. Otherwise, there is something or the other going on in the background. Either it's music or a podcast. So I don't think I have a baseline of either. It's somewhere in between. So just trying to figure out what is it that works for you helps you operate much more fluidly in the world.
Yeah, I'm the same way. When I really have to study or do something, it's better that I'm silent. But interestingly, I found that if I'm reading a book, you could dance around me probably, and I would not be. I just get so engrossed in what I'm reading and the information that goes in my mind, and that just kind of is interesting because again, taking it to a place where silence is something that could be actually a product of your own mind. Like you could impose silence on the world, and it's not just the world that affects you, and you're just at the mercy of what the world is doing, like whether it's noisy or silent in a physical sense. But silence is also something that we can teach ourselves to have control of, and then impose silence from our mind on the outside world and kind of negate any sort of effects that the world has on us. Is this something you encountered, or like you feel you from all the lessons you've learned around also being alone? Is this some sort of skill that you can see yourself practicing?
Um, yes and no. Actually, no, because I don't like the word control. For a good part of my life, I have tried the approach of control. No, I have to control my emotions. I have to control my fear. I have to control this. I have to control that. Doesn't work. It just doesn't. You just waste your energy over it. So I like to think of it in a way that you accept it, and that is the entire concept of letting go. Letting go is not about letting go something through your hands or dropping it. Letting go means accepting things the way they are, and once you do that, it doesn't bother you anymore. And that is what letting go. That is exactly when letting go happens, right? So I don't think that ability to control that I have been operating for a very long time is either helpful or has helped me. Um, so I go with this approach of, okay, this is the situation, and what is it about the situation that is bothering me? Because obviously there is some amount of discomfort that it's causing me. And if I can drill down into that and then realize that, okay, this is the reason I am feeling this way, and what can I do to not feel it that way? Then maybe that what can I do to not feel it that way? Again, I wouldn't call it control. I would call it free will. Because and again, that's a very interesting concept for me. In For the longest time in my head, I thought free will was something that you are allowed to choose how your life turns out to be, and that has been propagated by a lot of these books called The Secret and all of that. I have realized it's not that, because you cannot really change the direction or course of what your life is going to be. What you can do is how you choose to react to a certain situation, or rather, how you choose to respond to a certain situation, not even react. And that choice, that is free will.
Yeah,
So,
that's interesting. So if I'm going to reframe what I just said, because to a large degree I agree with you, and I have a huge long story about letting go in my life on something that was very meaningful to me, which might come up. Um, but maybe it's not that we are able to produce silence and impose it on the world, but we are able to, if we are in a good place with our souls and the whole place, then we are able to filter out some things that would usually rock our boat or put us on tilt or something like that, and throw us off what we were doing. And having the mental resilience to filter things out and resume as normal or react in a non-trivial or non-standard way. Like, even though it's easier to get angry sometimes, the right thing to do is to react differently. And for that, maybe we need to know how to keep our inner silence, not by imposing our silence, like I said before, but filtering out things and just staying with things through for a little bit until other options occur to us, like you say. And I agree with you that this feels like free will to me, is having a hefty buffer and a large repertoire of possible responses and actions to things. So free will is to me cultivating a large repertoire of possible actions, of reactions actually, in life. And that allows you to be more flexible mentally. And you're not the type of person who is bound to repeat their mistakes all the time.
Yeah, that's actually the point. I agree with you, Yal. So again, if I go back to the very first thing that I had mentioned, or rather one of the first things about me being away from my family since I was a child, right? So I think the silence that I have cultivated within has helped me get through some of the trauma that would have left a very deep impact of not having parental figures, or not having familial love. So how much ever unlovable that I feel or invisible that I feel within my family, that silence helps me realize that they are unable to look beyond their own world, and they're unable to see in what terms it hurts me or another person. And for that, I cannot hold a grudge against them. And for that, I cannot hold a grudge against myself. All that I can do is, yes, that happened. Yes, there are certain emotions associated with it, but how do I choose to react with it? So yeah,
Yes.
that's silent. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, I think that's so true. And from my knowledge of trauma, major trauma, I'm not just saying like anything, but the kind of trauma that kind of keeps holding you back, like even later in life. And from the people I've known with that are dealing with those type of things, it's very much a sort of not being able to shake off something that's happened to you before, and not being able to filter out those triggers that are everywhere around you, because anything could at any moment kind of hijack your soul back to that place. And over there, it's more like a program than anything with free will. You just go through the same cycles over and over. And that's really fascinating. So let me ask you, if is it something that you consciously aimed for, like putting things behind you and moving on? And did you have a practice to do that, or is it something that just gradually and naturally matured in you?
I think it has gradually and naturally matured. Earlier, I have gone down those paths, beating my chest and my hands. Like, I will not accept why this is happening to me, and destiny is so unfair. And I think those are the moments in life that, yes, you should allow yourself to feel those emotions, because otherwise there is no other outlet for them. But those are also the moments which drag you into that chasm of loneliness, where um, you feel a certain way and you would want to reach out to somebody, maybe, even if it is a happy news and you have nobody to reach out to. If it's a sad news, you want to cry on somebody's shoulders, but you can't. That very feeling that is heart ripping or breath choking feeling, that to me is loneliness. And that can spiral into depression, which has at certain points of time in my life as well. But I don't think I made a very conscious effort at doing that. I think when I made my foray into tarot card readings, and from there into certain other healing techniques, and meditations, it kind of started maturing at a very, very slow pace. And I am glad where it has brought me today.
Me too, first of all, and it's great to hear. And I'm interested in the process itself. Is it that you could you say that you felt at certain points that you have points in time where you tell yourself, "Oh, I see now that I can actually react differently and not in the same way that I was so-called programmed before," and you felt this opening up of more options available to you in terms of responding to situations?
Yeah. Yeah, certainly. I mean, I think just like everybody else, I've had my fair share of relationships, which have obviously all gone bad. Otherwise, I wouldn't be single today. But I think that is one area that I definitely feel that it has matured a lot and it has opened up options within me. So there was this one phase in my life where, and this was, I don't know, 15, 20 years or 15, 16 years ago, where I was in a relationship with somebody and we really deeply cared about each other and we were engaged to be married. And that didn't work through because his family had some trivial issues. And that has obviously left a very deep scar emotionally. But every time that now I go through situations and I think back and it's like, if I could endure that, this is nothing. There's literally nothing. And in terms of opening up of options, as you mentioned, yes. So I again found myself in a situation a couple of years back where I had very strong feelings, not had, I have very strong feelings for this person. And I did express my, feelings to him, but those weren't reciprocated. But I could not take it in a bad sense. I was like, okay, that is his volition. That is his choice. And that kind of opened my mind. I was like, wow, you have grown up. You're not clingy anymore. So, yes, I think, yeah, situations in life can either make you or break you. In this case, it has definitely made me and opened up a lot more options of how I react or respond to a situation.
Oh, that's amazing, and thank you for being so open and candid. Yeah, I feel with my life the same. So my mom died when I was 10, and I immediately I was a sensitive kid, so I immediately like dipped into depression for a good few years. Not it wasn't clinically diagnosed, but whatever. I think we all
Yeah.
know if we're depressed, we know it.
Yeah.
And yeah, for sure, I remember that I wanted this silence that we talked about, and the most extreme form of achieving that silence or whatever is committing suicide and being all wrapped up in that and being morbid and in that way. And I definitely feel like at some point after years, I had started to regain more autonomy, and like I said before, like have this buffer between me and things where I grew up in my soul enough that not every little thing would affect me horrendously. And from there on, I could think about things for a few seconds before I reacted, in a few minutes,
Yeah.
then a few days, and just have more and more autonomy and more of myself to work with. And I think that's also something that connects to our talk about silence before.
Yeah, and that can be such a liberating feeling, right? I mean, where you know that you're not allowing a situation to overwhelm you or take you over and drown you in it. Rather you are able to step out, look at it as a third person, and make the right choice. Not may not always be a rational choice, but it will be a right choice.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So I'm wondering, since you mentioned like already gotten to a point in your life that's about 3 years ago or so, and now we also get back on the timeline, back to your time in the Himalayas, um, looking at those lakes and wondering about them. At that point, do you feel like something additional has clicked, or have you meditated on that and come to conclusions, or are you still thinking about it? And how do you view these terms that you chose to talk about today in your life today? Like, and where do you think they could evolve still?
I think that that particular day, that particular moment was something that clicked in the sense it brought these three concepts for me in one form. So while I was obviously contemplating on that, I could just remember something from Henry Miller, and I don't want to get it wrong, so I'm just going to read it out. But there's one quote from Henry Miller which says that I see myself forever and ever as a ridiculous person, the lonely soul, the wanderer, the restless, frustrated artist, the person in love, with love, always in search of the absolute, always seeking the unattainable. And I don't know why this thought clicked at that particular point of time, but it it made a lot of sense because it shows that how perfectly imperfect we all can be. We don't have to always be the right person or do the right things. You can feel like a mess and you can still love. You can be a devil to somebody, but you can be an angel to another person. So you don't really have to be perfect embodiment of a human species, because I don't think even God is perfect. Right. And what brought together everything in that moment is, one was the silence that I was experiencing, just sitting there, listening to the soft ripples, the breeze. There were a couple of birds around. That, even though there was those natural sounds, there was a certain very deep silence in that area. And through that, obviously, the aloneness of me sitting there and enjoying it all, because there's nobody around me for at least 500 meters, and everything is just for me here, and nature is putting on a show and I'm the only spectator, and it was awesome. So that aloneness, I understood what that aloneness is. And loneliness is because I was traveling with the person that I had affections for, and even at that point of time I could not share in that moment with him or express what I was feeling. And that brought home the fact of loneliness. And I thought that all these three go hand in hand. And it's beautiful the way it is.
It is. It's very beautiful, and the quote is beautiful, and the synthesis you made with it is beautiful. And would it be fair to say that this is a sort of these things all of a sudden coming together is something that is salient enough that you can carry with you, carry it on, and kind of tap into that place at any point now?
Yeah, every single time. And anybody, anytime asks me, what is your favorite memory or favorite place, without hesitation, my tongue rolls out of that particular day. So I know that that was the most divine moment I ever experienced. And once you touch that kind of divinity, it doesn't leave you. It just doesn't leave you.
That's amazing because being a lesser human being, my my most divine moments were probably on psychoactive compounds, and I'm just I'm just wondering now that I'm hearing you saying this, I'm just really interested to I'm really interested in hearing from you if you have some recipe for creating such a divine moment, or do you think it's just chance or something else?
No, I don't think it's just chance. It is definitely preparation, but the preparation is not something that you have to toil or work towards a lot. It's just about a shift in your perception. So, a shift in perception from heaven is out there to heaven is in me, or God is a supreme being somewhere sitting on the clouds. To I am the God particle. I am made of in His image, as they say. It is just that shift, and a lot of people I know keep keep talking about enlightenment and what are the things we should do to be enlightened. Who says you're not enlightened? Maybe you just haven't opened up or opened your eyes to see that you already are enlightened, and there are just these veils all around you that are blocking you to see that. And once you can have that realization, I think that is that. But yeah, that realization takes some work of cutting down self destructive behavior, generational trauma, personal belief sets. And that is what is the work all about.
No, that's amazing, and it gives me a lot of food for thought. I think the underlying thing behind these things could be curiosity, right? At the base, just keeping an
Ah,
open mind and really experimenting and thinking about more options, more modes of being, experimenting with that, more ways of thinking, that knowing that there are things that you don't know, and really wanting to know them. Um,
yeah, and it's so interesting you touch upon that because I think the biggest shift that I have seen, at least in my life, is from a place of trying to fit in or people please, moving towards finding and appreciating people who give me a sense of awe and wonder and who inspire me. So yes, you're correct.
well, it's good to hear you from that. Maybe I'm on the fast track of realizing I'm already enlightened. Um,
Yes.
no, I think that has to be it, because for me, I think, for the longest time, I thought you don't realize it, but you're so conditioned to operate in ways that are expected of you from other people, and you don't realize the extent to which it affects you. And I think everyone has to go through their own journey of going crazy. And I don't mean going crazy as in not being able to communicate anymore with other people, or not seeing reality as it is, or anything like that. But um,
But
re-
what is reality?
yeah, good question. um,
Maybe for another time.
um, yeah, I just mean that you really have to be curious about yourself and what kind of being you can grow into, because you can just understand that from day one of your life, people are starting to pinpoint you and kind of telling you, and the first time they tell you, like, oh, way to go for doing this, or you're really good at this. Now it's kind of pinpointing you to doing that thing, maybe, if you want to still feel validation and all these things. And I think at some point you have to throw all these away and really ask yourself, if I am not this ego that was created for me and by me too, then what am I? What do I want to do? Where does my mind naturally go, and what thoughts come into it? And this is what I mean by going crazy is not something bad, but it's like kind of breaking away from your old self, and hearing your story and what you went through. It just, maybe I think that's going back to your childhood and the things you did, um, to get yourself out of childhood trauma. And it may be the fact that, in a sense, do you feel like you were more free to be yourself? Because if the downside of not having close family around you is very, very clear and traumatic. And no doubt it's not something that we would wish on others. But if there is any sort of upside and something that would make you today say that you wouldn't do things otherwise, it's the fact that maybe you were freer to be yourself. Do you feel that? Or am I missing the mark?
No, I think that's completely true. So I have gone from fear to being free. So yeah. And as you said, just being weird doesn't really bother anymore. Be weird, be nuttier, be crazier, and it's
Exactly.
amazing.
That's why I've been tweeting about pulling off a Dennis Rodman lately. Let's see if I do it ever.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it's been an amazing conversation. Thank you so much for being so open and
Thank you.
candid
Thank
with
you
me.
for
And
inviting me. Thank you.
yeah, of course. And if you want to sum up or say anything additional, or now that we're at the end of the show, say more about yourself, more about how you spend your days and what the projects you're working on, then you're more than welcome to do that now.
So, if I have to sum up, what I would say is not the term loneliness is definitely not a bad thing, as I have realized, or it definitely doesn't have to have negative connotations. You can harness the power of loneliness and move it towards aloneness and silence, where you feel comfortable in your skin. And life gives, I think, everybody an opportunity to do this. It's just about um, it's just about trying to tap into that opportunity when it comes through rather than letting it go. So I hope that helps and that makes sense. But in terms of my personal profile, well, apart from having a very, very normal, boring corporate job, Um, I love traveling and photography, and you can find my work on wanderingruminations.com. And I'm also a healer and tarot card reader, and you can find me on tanyaraj.com there. So that's about me.
Well, Tanya, thank you so much. And I have no doubt that this conversation is going to be of help to, a certain percentage of people listening to it and dealing with some tough spots in their life and rough patches. And thank you so much again. And you're always welcome
Thank you.
to do this again with me, because I'm sure we haven't covered all the terms that you've thought about in your life, and you're so articulate and candid. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Eyal.
Bye bye.
Bye.